Hi there folks, welcome back to the IBN Fishing channel. I hope you're doing really well and welcome back to another review here in our little corner of YouTube. And it's a really big review this week. As you'll have seen from the thumbnail, we have had access to, for a wee while now, the brand new, all singing, all dancing Orvis Helios 4 in the 9-foot 4-weight F finesse configuration. Now, before I go any further, I just want to give a big thanks to the folks at Orvis UK. I had a bit of a disaster. I'd been reviewing this all summer, got loads of cool footage of catching trout on it right the way through the summer, and my hard drive in my laptop completely blanked. It's just completely gone. So all of the footage I had for basically the entire summer, other than a few spare bits and pieces, was gone. Orvis UK very kindly let us keep hold of the rods just for a little bit longer, just so we could get the review done, so we can show you guys exactly what we think of the Helios 4F. You'll have noticed I said rods there, because Orvis actually sent us two rods. They sent us their demo model, which had been lightly used already by the time we got it, and they sent us this one that I've got in my hands, which is the brand new version. It's the one that's in most of the footage B-roll, so if the rod looks brand spanking new, it's just because we've been given two rods, one to review and one to B-roll. Want to crack straight on with this one because there is an awful lot to talk about, starting with the fact that you get that lovely white rock solid aluminium tube with it. Sort of thing you'd expect from a premium rod. Most of the manufacturers these days do this hard aluminium tube. Lots of branding on there. Controversial colour, we'll talk about that in a bit. Branding on the cap on the top, that feels absolutely rock solid. We'll slide this straight out or very gently pop the tube on the floor just next to me. And there's the rod bag. Straight away, a little bit of innovation here. Not something that I can remember seeing before. Rather than this being tied, rather than you having to tie it up in between use, there's just a handy little plastic clip there. You just pop your little clip and your rod bag opens. That's fancy, isn't it? Nice durable rod bag, I will say that. It's not some flimsy plastic thing, it is a really nicely made bag. We'll go straight in here, we'll pop the rod out, get rid of the bag as well, because we don't need that one, even if it is a little bit fancy. Obviously, all the rods in the range are 4-piece rods. It's very hard these days to find rods that aren't made in the 4-piece configuration. And what we have there is the butt section of the Helios 4F, the brand new Helios 4 in the 9-foot 4-weight F configuration. I'll just go through that very quickly. They do two different versions of most of the freshwater rods, an F, which stands for finesse, and a D, which stands for distance. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if there is even a 9-foot 4-weight D or not. Now, you'll have had to have been living on another planet to have missed all the hyper marketing around the new Orvis Helios range. It's been absolutely everywhere for the last 6 months. A lot of that real heavy American marketing stuff feels a little bit heavy sometimes for the UK market, and I must admit sometimes it gets a little bit much for me. But ultimately, when it comes down to the design of these rods, what Orvis are saying is that they've managed to create a rod that is 4 times more accurate than all of the other rods on the market. And they've come up with metrics that they say will help measure that accuracy and gives you, the user, more of an idea of what all the fancy words and what the big numbers actually mean. They can sort of put it into some sort of context. But before we get to that, I just want to go through what we've got in the tube, what we've got as the rod as it comes, and then we'll talk about action, we'll talk about fishing with it. We've got to talk about the price at some point as well. But let's go through the rod first and just see what we've actually got here. And we're starting right down at the butt section with a Type 3 anodised single lock-in aluminium reel seat that's over a really pretty piece of burled wood. There's no information from Orvis, as far as I can see, about what the wood actually is. Both this and the demo model and the test model were pretty dark in colour. Really does suit the actual rod quite nicely, but I can't tell you what the wood actually is. We come up from there, we've got a lovely reverse half-wells handle here. Not too thick on the handle, not too slim either. It's a lovely fit. Really nice piece of cork that. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. We come up a little bit further and we've got what probably was the controversial bit of the Helios 3, which is the branding that Orvis have stuck with. This is one of those things that people either seem to love or hate, but you cannot miss when someone's fishing with one of these on the bank with that bright white branding down here with the split white and grey. Very modern, very minimalist, completely sets it apart from other rods. Has no impact on the actual fishing of it at all, but it's one of those things that certainly split people. I imagine probably in the future, as they did with the Helios 3, Orvis will come out with a more subtly coloured version of this for the area of the market that sort of hasn't taken to this white branding. We come up the blank a little bit away from that white branding and we've got a beautiful matte olive finish to the blank here. Really lovely matte finish. I like matte finish rods. I don't know what it is. It's just something that I like rather than being a heavy gloss finish. A single titanium stripper guide on this one, and then from there up we've got the REC recoil bendy guides up here, which are fantastically light, incredibly durable, all super flexy right the way through to a relatively small round tip guide. In between there, all the joints have got alignment dots so you can make sure that everything's pointing in the right direction for you. The one thing that actually Orvis don't give a whole lot of information about is the actual blank itself in terms of what the technology might be. I know a lot of the other brands like to come up with fancy words. We've done Cintrix, we've done Powerlux, so there's a few others on the market as well. Orvis don't give a huge amount of detail as to what's actually gone into the blank of these rods, which is interesting. In fact, I actually found it pretty hard to even find a weight for this rod anywhere on the internet, but I slapped it on our kitchen scales and it came out at 82 grams, which at the premium market it's still very, very light. That is a fantastically light fly rod. I do think we're a little bit spoilt with weights these days. When we're talking about a 10% weight saving on a 90 gram rod, I mean, crikey, by the time you've put a reel on the end of it, by the time you've put a line out it, by the time you've got 20, 30 feet out the tip, I do think we're a little bit spoilt with these weights. All the Orvis marketing stuff tells us that this is a real all-round rod range designed for dries, nymphs and streamers in rivers, lakes and streams. It's very, very vague, to be honest. Basically what they're saying is you can use these rods absolutely anywhere in freshwater. They are kitted out as freshwater rods. There is a separate saltwater range on the Helios 4. So if you're going to be doing the salty stuff, you'd probably move over to one of the other ranges that's a bit more appropriate. So in terms of what we've got here, that really is about as much as I can say. As I say, without the extra sort of bump behind the blank construction, stuff like that, it's pretty hard to give any other information, and Orvis have kept that pretty tight. What they have gone really, really heavy on is sort of being able to analyse the performance of these rods. They keep throwing out this 4 times more accurate in terms of how they feel like the rod performs. And the way they're going through that is by showing the tip displacement of the rod against both the Helios 3, the previous most accurate rod, and the rest of the competitors. And what they're saying is that because the tip doesn't displace as much on the Helios 4 as it does on the previous models or on the market competitors, you're able to place line more accurately in straight lines towards your target, rather than having those little wrinkles going down the fly line, which are more likely to make you a less accurate caster. Now we know all that stuff is true. We know that the fewer little wiggles you go down your fly line, the more accurate you're going to be with that cast. The big test is, does that actually translate into real world fishing situations? For what I've actually done with the Helios 4, have we found that sort of level of accuracy fishing the rod? So what I want to do is go through now, talk about my actual fishing experiences with the rod, how it's performed for me on the bank, and talk about whether I think it can justify its position in the marketplace. We'll go back through the physical stuff first, very, very quickly. I was a little bit surprised to see a single locker on here, especially as it's been made to look like a double locking reel seat. But in truth, it's a really good quality reel seat. It hasn't budged. It's absolutely rock solid. The anodizing is fantastic. I can see nothing to go wrong with the actual sort of physicality of the reel seat. Even the little rubber bush in there, the little rubber gasket, seems very, very sturdy. It's one of those designs where the actual foot of the reel seat can't rotate, so you always know it's lined up. So all you need to do is screw it down and that reel is not going anywhere. As I said before, lovely piece of wood on the insert. I've got no idea what it is, but it's very pretty. There was quite a big difference in between this one and the actual test model that we got. If it's something you're really fussy about, make sure you go into a shop and have a look at a few, make sure you get one that you want. Coming up a little bit, one of the standout physical features of this rod definitely is the quality of this cork. Now you guys have heard me talk on these reviews before about cork quality and about how I feel like it's probably getting worse overall. This is the best quality cork I think I've ever seen on a fly rod. This is unbelievable. There is not a blemish on this. There is almost zero visible filler. Both this one and the test model, which obviously looks a little bit dirty because it's been fished a fair amount. I always look at cork on fly rods and I quite like seeing that little bit of composite at each end, because generally that's something that just protects the ends of the cork so it doesn't come apart. This cork is such good quality, it doesn't need it. It is absolutely beautiful. As I say, as far as I can remember, that is the best cork I've ever seen on a fly rod. And when we're talking about longevity of the use of the rod, enjoying using it, how it feels in the hand, that one bit of the rod that you're in contact with, it is important. It is something that I put a high value on. So straight away, big tick for Orvis, fantastic quality on the cork. No keeper ring above it. This is one of those things, I'm really big on keeper rings. I always call companies out when they don't put them on. I actually barely ever use them myself because I use quite long leaders. I generally pin the fly up by the rod tip and then bring the line and leader back round the reel. But I do always think there should be one. I've noticed it's probably more on premium rods they don't put them on. I guess maybe it saves a little bit of weight, maybe it just makes the rod look a little bit more tidy. If you like a keeper ring, you haven't got one this time. The brand inside of this, I sort of get what people are saying, that they didn't like the very white section on the Helios 3. It seems to really split people. It seems to be basically 50-50, but it's not the kind of thing that would personally stop me buying the rod. It looks incredibly modern. Personally for me, no issue at all. Finish on the rest of the rod was nigh on flawless. All of those guides are whipped on beautifully. It is clinically well finished. I'm pretty sure these are still finished in Vermont in the States. You know, these are really top end finished fly rods. There was a slight blemish actually on one of the snakes on this model here that I've got in my hands. I noticed it while I was filming some B-roll, but actually just a little flick of my fingernail on it. It pinged straight off, and now you would know it was never there. Again, if that's the kind of thing you're picky on when you go to buy your Orvis Helios 4, go to a shop, just have a look at a couple, find one that you think you might like the look of the most. But as I say, that one tiny little bit of varnish I found on there, little ping with my fingernail, off it went. Incredibly subtle on the finish, given how leery the butt section is, the rest of it with that matte olive, with the olive whippings over the top of it, incredibly subtle, really pretty. For those of you who are a bit put off about the white, you certainly won't be put off by the rest of the finish on here. And a mixture of that titanium stripper guide and then those REC recoils makes it incredibly light, incredibly durable. It is exactly what you'd expect in terms of finish from a rod at this price point, going right the way through to that fairly slender tip ring up at the top there. But guys, obviously we're not here to talk about how pretty or not pretty this rod is. We're here to talk about performance. At the sort of price point Orvis have put on the Helios, this has got to be a rod that performs exceptionally. So quick bit of context, I've done an awful lot of trout fishing with this rod that, as I say, I haven't got the footage of. That's all gone, so we'll never see it. What that has done is also given me the opportunity to use it quite a lot during the Grayling season here in the UK. We've just got over to the Grayling season, smaller fish with slightly softer mouths, and because it's been quite a mild autumn, we've still done quite an awful lot of dry fly fishing. So I've used this an awful lot with small dry flies, with soft mouth fish, fishing it with 7X an awful lot, as well as doing the heaviest trout stuff during the summer, as well as doing a little bit of duo fishing with it as well. You guys have seen me in one of the videos fishing the duo. So I've given the Helios 4 a real good kicking actually. It's had a much more sort of comprehensive review than perhaps any other rod we've ever used. Right guys, big question we've got to answer straight away is, do I feel like I am 4 times more accurate with this rod than I was before? And the answer to that is categorically no. Definitely not 4 times more accurate. Regard myself as being a pretty reasonable caster already. I'm already fairly accurate, and I feel like with most premium rods, I can generally get them to point where I want. What I will say is that I do feel like this is the most accurate fly rod I've ever used, without question. It is absolutely surgical. It is unerringly accurate. It's ridiculous. So I can't really quantify just how little it feels like that tip section does wobble on a cast, but it is absolutely laser precise. It really does feel different. It feels different to any other 9-foot 4-weight I've ever cast. I'll be honest, when I first put the rod together, when I first sort of held it in the house and gave it a little shop waggle just with no reel on it, I actually didn't like the feel of it. Straight away I thought, oh god, this feels stiff. This feels much stiffer than I thought the finesse version should be. And I was worried straight away. I actually set myself up to not like this rod. But it's interesting, actually, what I felt as stiffness when I gave it a waggle in the living room, actually, when that translated out onto being on the river, it just came to being a faster recovery. And I think we can sometimes get those two things confused as being the same thing. As a rod manufacturer, it's not that hard to make a rod that recovers really quickly, but you have to put loads of material in it. And then you end up with a rod that is going to be stiffer and heavier, but snaps back straight away, so you don't get many wobbles with it. When we're talking about a finesse style rod, a 9-foot 4-weight finesse style rod, at this weight, you can't put extra material in it because you end up with a rod that's really tip heavy. Actually, it could make it worse. It could make it wobble more. And what I thought was going to be a really sort of stiff, snappy action, it actually isn't. That is just that blank technology. Whatever it is that Orvis have used, they've managed to make a rod that actually does recover incredibly quickly without making it stiff. And I think that is the absolute key here, is they've managed to create a rod that's the weight you'd expect it to be for a premium rod, without it being stiff, but still getting that crazy recovery speed. I haven't fished anything quite like it in terms of recovery rate, and while I don't like all the graphs and the weird stuff and all their tip displacement stuff necessarily doesn't suit me in terms of how I like to take in marketing, I am actually finding it pretty hard to argue with. And this is with different lines as well. So I fished this with a 4-weight Airflow Universal Taper, I fished it with a 4-weight and a 5-weight Sierra Aerial, and I've also fished it with the 4-weight Scientific Anglers Amplitude MPX. And I actually found that that was the line that got the most of it. It is a little bit heavy, I think it's about half a line size heavy, the MPX, but I was using it a lot with the Duo, or with longer leaders for the dry fly fishing, so it sort of made sense. I found when I was casting this thing in conjunction with that MPX Amplitude, it just wanted more. Every time you made a cast, you hit the reel. So I'll give myself another yard there. And then you would seemingly make the same casting stroke with the same energy and the same timing, and it'd want another yard. And then it'd want another yard. I'd never found a point with this rod where I thought I've probably reached the limit here. And this is the finesse version, so goodness knows what the distance version's like. Initially I was worried with the rod that with that super fast recovery rate, is that going to struggle to protect light tippets? Is that going to be a problem with the 7X? So it's been really nice actually for the last 2 weeks during the Grayling season to just give that a thorough check through, and I can say categorically this has handled 7X, which for me is 2.89 pounds, I think it is, the Fulham Mill stuff. It's handled that 7X absolutely beautifully. It doesn't feel like you've got to be particularly careful with it either. It's ever such a strange rod in that respect, in that it has got that delicacy, it has got that light stuff, but it can also do more. But you never really feel like you've got to do much to make it work either way. Very unusual rod, really fantastic to cast and really lovely to play fish on as well. I think all that extra damping with the tip displacement stuff that Orvis is talking about is actually really nice with the roll cast as well. If you're throwing little circle C's, or if you're doing little wiggles or little snakes, or perhaps a double spay with it, those situations where you're talking about the rod perhaps moving around laterally a little bit, again, it just doesn't do that because it doesn't wobble around at all. It just stays almost poker straight up until the point where you apply the power on the cast. It just doesn't seem to do any of the wobbly stuff. I found it a very, very difficult rod to sort of describe to people. I've been thinking about doing this review for ages, and I've thought, how am I going to put this into words? Because it's quite a difficult thing to sort of get across. And it was actually a client, one of my guiding clients, who came up with something. And this guy's a real vinyl junkie. He likes his records. And he said, do you know what this is, Andy? This is the highest quality digital sound you'll ever hear. And he said, if you're into LPs, if you like something with a little bit of soul and a little bit of wobble, it might not be for you. And actually for me that sort of worked. I understood exactly what he was saying about that, because it doesn't have those the little foibles and little wobbles. It perhaps is just missing a little bit of soul. But then I thought, well, do you actually need that soul? Or do you need a rod that's going to do exactly what you want it to, point it exactly where you want it to go, and it will go there? And it is exactly that. So if you're into vinyl, this is top quality digital sound. If you're into 1950s muscle cars, this is probably a brand new Tesla. It is perfectly designed to do exactly what it's supposed to do. It's not a rod that you're going to fall in love with because of its little foibles and its little wrinkles and its little deficiencies. It's a rod that you're going to fall in love with because it doesn't do any of that stuff. It just does exactly what you ask it to every single time. Generally at this point in a review, I like to come up with a little list of things that maybe I didn't like, or things that might not be right. It's very, very difficult with this thing because ultimately I can't really find a fault with it. The aesthetics are what they are. If you really hate it, just wrap some black gaffer tape around it, you won't even see it. But in terms of actual performance of a fly rod, this is the best 9'4" weight I've ever cast. It's as simple as that. It's the best 9'4" weight I've ever cast. And not by a little bit either, probably by quite a distance. It is an absolutely outrageous fly rod. For the kind of fishing we do here in the UK, if you're fishing the chalk streams or if you're fishing some of the bigger freestone rivers, I'm not sure you'll ever find a better rod on the market for it than this. I just can't find anything not to like about it. I've watched an awful lot of different people cast this, from people who have literally never picked up a fly rod before to absolute experts, and it's put a smile on everybody's face. Every single person who has cast this fly rod has gone, wow, that's quite something. I guess the one thing to really not like about the Orvis Helios 4 is the price, because there is no doubt about it, this is premium, premium, premium. At a retail price of £1,159 for a single-handed fly rod, this is an awful lot of money to pay for a fly rod. I will say, given the context of the market, if it's American made, if it's top end, if it's got all the fancy stuff on it, the titanium guides and the bendy guides and all that stuff, top end cork, it does seem to be £1,000, whether it's a Sage, whether it's an Orvis, whether it's a Loomis or a Winston. £1,000 for a top end American made fly rod does seem to be where the market is now. So in context of the other rods available, it is where it is. It is in that price point. Could I ever justify paying £1,000 for a single-handed fly rod? I mean, that is completely up to you. I'm not going to tell you guys how to spend your money. What I usually say about these premium rods is if you're a new fly angler, if you're a beginner, or if you're inexperienced, don't use them. Because usually the performance benefits there are quite hard to access. They're not things that you're going to notice until you've got better. Actually, I've watched people who have never cast a fly rod before pick this up and use it. And because it doesn't wobble, because there isn't that extra displacement, I actually found that it was easier to teach beginners to cast with this rod than it was with the cheaper rods that I usually use. Now that could be the same with other premium rods. I haven't tried it as much, but there's no doubt about it that there are performance qualities in this that you can access even if you're not a top caster. Obviously not everyone needs to go out and spend £1,000 on a fly rod. But if you're inclined to do that, if you think you're going to buy a fly rod and then keep it for the next 25 years and you can justify the money, and you've got to justify it, that's not up to me, go and buy one. At least go and test one. But definitely, if you're going to spend that money, go and test one. I'm fascinated to hear what people think about these because my experience was overwhelmingly positive. One of the other great justifications of spending £1,000 on the new Orvis Helios is their 25-year warranty. Now, where other rods on the market have a fairly limited warranty, the Orvis warranty is completely unlimited. They say if you step on it, if you trap it in a car door, however you break this rod, they'll try and fix it. And if they can't fix it, they'll replace the rod. And if they can't replace that rod because it's gone out of production, they'll replace it with another rod of the same price. So when you're buying an Orvis, you know for 25 years, you've got a fly rod. Guys, I don't want to go on too much longer. I know I've done an awful lot of talking here. But it really does justify the hype. It justifies the marketing, even if it feels a little bit in your face, a little bit over the top. Basically, what I've found they're saying is relatively true. It is a significantly more accurate fly rod than anything I've ever cast previously. Over different distances, with different casting styles, different casting abilities, and different fly lines, it is a rod that is unashamedly proud of being a market leader. You can't miss it. You can't miss the tube. You can't miss the marketing. Orvis are putting this in your face for a reason. They're proud of it because it's a fabulous fly rod. It's very, very good, and I'm going to miss it because I've got to send it back on Monday. I'm going to really miss having these things around. I do not know how much better a 9-foot 4-weight river fly angler's fly rod could get than the one I've got in my hands at the moment. It's going to be fascinating to see where we are in 10 or 15 years' time. Because if it's a lot better than this, I'd be very, very surprised. Guys, as ever, thank you so much for watching this review. We really appreciate it. If you've used one, or if you've bought one, or if you've tested one, please do drop us a note in the comment section because I'm always interested to hear how other people have gotten with these rods. Actually, here's one. In the comment section, let me know what is the absolute maximum amount of money you would ever spend on a single-handed fly rod to fish for trout and grayling with. I'd be really interested by that. As I say, the premium end seems to now be £1,000 for a top end rod. That seems to be where we are. But my question is, what is the most you guys will spend on a single-handed fly rod? I'd be really interested to find out some feedback from that. I've got to crack on and do some editing. Thank you very, very much again for watching this. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, and hopefully you guys will catch up with IB and I soon for some more fly fishing, some more reviews, and some more stuff. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.